What if the secret to unbelievable strength wasn't what you've always assumed? Samson, the mighty man of God, known for his unimaginable feats, seemed invincible. But what if there was more to his power than just his physical prowess? What if his true strength came from a place far deeper? Something unexpected? The truth about Samson's strength may leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Samson's life was marked by extraordinary victories. But hidden beneath his might was a truth so powerful, it could shake the foundation of what you believe about strength itself. Could there be something far more significant at play? Something he didn't fully understand? But was there all along? What if his strength came at a cost, something no one saw coming? Comment 777 if you feel the call to uncover the mystery of Samson's true power. This is more than just a comment. It's a declaration of your own connection to the divine strength within you. And for those of you who have supported us through Super Thanks, thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Your generosity makes this journey possible. Now, let's embark on the journey to uncover the untold truths behind Samson's strength. It's a story that will change the way you see power, fate, and destiny. Stay with us. Samson, the Bible's strongest man, and the shocking truth behind his strength. In the land of Israel, a shadow hung over the people. For years, they had been subjugated by the Philistines, their strength and freedom stripped away by their enemies. But in the midst of their oppression, God, in his infinite wisdom, prepared a deliverer. This was no ordinary child. This was Samson, a man destined to defy the odds and fulfill God's divine purpose. Samson's birth was no accident, nor was it a mere twist of fate. It occurred at a time when the Israelites had again fallen short in the eyes of the Lord. As the book of Judges so plainly states, again the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. And for this, the Lord gave them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years, Judges 13:1. It was in the midst of this dark period, under the weight of their suffering, that God chose to act in a way only he could. A humble man named Manoah, from the tribe of Dan, had a wife who was barren. This was not a rare situation for many in those days, but it was deeply painful for the couple. Yet, it was in this moment of grief that God's plan began to unfold. The angel of the Lord appeared to Manoah's wife, and with a divine proclamation, her life was forever changed. "You will give birth to a son," the angel declared. This would not be just any son. This child would grow up to become the deliverer of Israel. The angel's message was clear. "You are barren, but you shall conceive and bear a son," Judges 13:3. In moments like this, one might pause and wonder, could such a miraculous event be real? Could a barren woman truly bear a son who would change the course of history? This was not the first time God had worked in such extraordinary ways. In the Old Testament, we see the birth of Isaac to Sarah, a woman well beyond childbearing years. And in the New Testament, we witness the miraculous conception of John the Baptist. God's ability to bring life where there was none is a theme that runs deeply through the Scriptures, a testament to his power over the natural world. The angel's message, however, came with a profound responsibility. This child, who would rise to prominence as Israel's next judge, was to be raised under the Nazirite vow, a sacred commitment explained in Numbers 6:1-5. This vow was not a light matter. It required a life of separation, of discipline, and of dedication to God. Samson's strength, the very thing that would define his future, would come only through his obedience to this vow. A vow that forbade cutting his hair, consuming alcohol, or touching anything unclean. The Lord, in his infinite wisdom, spoke directly to Moses, giving him a command to relay to the Israelites. If a man or woman desires to make a special vow, a vow of dedication to the Lord as a Nazirite, they must abstain from wine and other fermented drinks. They must not drink vinegar made from wine or any other fermented beverage. They must avoid grape juice, grapes, and raisins. In fact, as long as they remain under their Nazirite vow, nothing from the grapevine, neither the seeds nor the skins, should touch their lips. Numbers 6:1-4. This vow was not a mere formality. It was a divine calling, a declaration of holiness, a promise of separation unto God. In Samson's case, this vow became the very foundation of his destiny. As the angel of the Lord foretold the purpose of his life while he was still in the womb, no razor may touch his head, the angel declared, for he must be holy until the period of his dedication to the Lord is over. His hair shall grow long, Judges 13:5. It was clear Samson was set apart from birth. His strength, which would one day become legendary, was intricately tied to this vow. His calling was to be a Nazirite, one whose very identity would be marked by abstinence and consecration to God. Interestingly, the angel also instructed Samson's mother not to consume wine, beer, or anything unclean during her pregnancy. Though Samson was not yet born, his consecration had already begun. He was already being sanctified, already being set apart for the great work God had planned for him. Even before he took his first breath, upon receiving such a profound message, the woman went to her husband, Manoah, to share the incredible encounter with the angel. She relayed every word of the divine visitor's instruction. But Manoah, although he trusted his wife, wanted further confirmation. He prayed to God, pleading, "O my Lord, let the man of God whom you sent come again and teach us what we shall do for the child who will be born." Judges 13:8. This prayer was not born out of doubt, but out of a deep desire for understanding. What did this vow mean for their child? What would it require of them as parents? God, ever faithful to his people, heard the voice of Manoah, and in answer to his prayer, the angel appeared once again. This time, the woman was in the field, and Manoah was not with her. Overcome with excitement, she ran to her husband and declared, "Look, the man who came to me the other day has just now appeared to me." Manoah wasted no time. He quickly rose and followed his wife to meet the heavenly visitor. When he approached the man, he asked, "Are you the man who spoke to this woman?" The angel answered simply, "I am." In that moment, Manoah's heart swelled with anticipation. Now let your words come to pass. What will be the boy's rule of life in his work? He wanted to know the full extent of the divine plan for his son. What would Samson's life look like? How would the vow shape him and the nation of Israel? The angel, speaking with clarity and solemnity, responded, "Of all that I said to the woman, let her be careful. She may not eat anything from the vine, nor drink wine or similar drink, nor eat anything unclean. All that I commanded her, let her observe." Judges 13:13. The message was simple yet profound. Samson's parents must honor the vow and its requirements in every aspect of their lives. Their obedience would play a pivotal role in fulfilling God's purpose for their son. At this moment, Manoah, in his awe, likely misunderstood the nature of the visitor. Perhaps he thought he was a mere man sent by God to deliver a message. With great reverence, he asked, "Please stay here, and we will prepare a young goat for you." But the angel, in his heavenly wisdom, refused the offer of food. Instead, he said, "If you prepare a burnt offering, offer it to the Lord." Judges 13:16. This was a sacred reminder. Any offering, any act of devotion, should be directed to God alone, not to the messenger. As the flames from the altar soared toward the heavens, something extraordinary happened. As requested by the angel, Manoah placed the burnt offering on the rock, and as the fire blazed, the angel of the Lord rose within the very flame, ascending toward the sky. The sight was beyond belief. Manoah and his wife, in the presence of this divine miracle, were struck with awe and fear, overcome by the glory of the moment. They fell face down to the ground in reverence. But as the fire flickered out and the angel disappeared, terror gripped Manoah's heart. "We're certainly going to die because we have seen God," he exclaimed, his voice trembling with dread. In his mind, the divine visitor was no mere angel, but the very presence of God himself, an understanding that struck him with both awe and fear. Yet, it was in this moment of fear that Manoah's wife, grounded in faith, spoke with wisdom. If the Lord had desired to kill us, he would not have accepted our burnt offering and grain offering. She reassured him. He would not have shown us such wondrous things, nor have told us such things at this time. Her words, calm yet filled with clarity, reminded him of God's mercy. Their offering had been accepted, and God had chosen to reveal his plan not to destroy them, but to give them hope and purpose. The woman, with full trust in God's promises, bore a son and named him Samson. The boy, destined for greatness, began to grow, and the Lord's hand was evident upon him. As Samson matured, the Spirit of the Lord began to move upon him at Mahane Dan. Situated between Zorah and Eshtaol, this was the beginning of the great work God had prepared for him, a work that would unfold with each step Samson took toward fulfilling his calling. Despite his divine calling, Samson's journey would not be without flaws. Though set apart by God from birth, Samson made decisions that would seem at odds with his consecration. His choices were at times reckless, even misguided, and yet God, in his infinite grace, chose to use Samson in spite of his own mistakes. It is a testament to God's mercy that even in the face of human weakness, he can still accomplish his purpose. Samson's life would reveal the power of divine grace, showing us that God can use anyone, even when they falter, even when they stray from their calling. His story is a reminder that God's plans are not dependent on our perfection, but on his sovereign will. Even when we fail, God is still able to move through us, shaping us for the work he has destined us for. Samson's life is an example of how God works in mysterious ways, choosing to use the imperfect to fulfill his perfect plans. Samson, full of youthful vigor and a deep sense of destiny, made his way to Timnah, where his eyes locked on a young Philistine woman. Something about her stirred him, compelling him to speak of her to his parents when he returned home. "I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah," he said with certainty. "Now, Get her for me as my wife." His one foe, his parents, perplexed by this request, responded with concern, their voices thick with the weight of tradition and faith. "Isn't there an acceptable woman among your own people, among those who follow God's covenant? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to find a wife?" They couldn't understand why Samson, chosen for a special purpose, would seek to marry someone from the very people who oppressed them. But Samson, with the fire of his desire burning bright, answered, "Get her for me. She's the right one for me." His words left little room for argument. His heart fixed on this woman. What his parents didn't know, what none of them could see, was that this seemingly personal choice was actually a piece of a much larger puzzle. God, in his mysterious way, was using this very situation to set into motion something far greater than anyone could have imagined. The Philistines, who had held Israel captive for so long, were about to face a confrontation, and Samson's choice, his very desire for this woman, was part of the divine plan to bring that about. This was a moment of divine irony. Samson's parents were trying to guide him, their wisdom clouded by a lack of understanding of God's purpose. They saw a son's choice, a young man's longing for a woman, but God saw the unfolding of his plan, woven into the very fabric of their lives. Even in the desires Samson thought were his own, the path he chose was not his to chart alone, for the Lord was moving in ways unseen, preparing Samson for a battle that would change the course of Israel's history. And so, as Samson's story unfolds, we find ourselves witnessing not just a man seeking love, but a vessel being prepared for the impossible. As Samson journeyed toward Timnah, where his bride to be awaited, a fierce encounter unfolded. The path took him and his parents near the vineyards of Timnah, when, without warning, a young lion lunged toward him, its roar cutting through the air. In that moment, something extraordinary happened. The Spirit of the Lord surged upon Samson with overwhelming power, and without hesitation, he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, just as easily as one might tear a young goat. This was no ordinary feat of strength, it was a divine display of power, a clear sign that Samson had been chosen for a mission far beyond human capability. Yet, despite the miraculous nature of what had just occurred, Samson said nothing to his parents about the event, keeping the astonishing act to himself. After this extraordinary moment, Samson continued his journey to Timnah. There, he spoke with the woman who had caught his eye, and he found that he was deeply attracted to her. But it was not just his heart that would be tested in this journey. His mind, too, would play a crucial role in the unfolding events. Samson, ever the bold spirit, devised a challenge for the Philistines at a feast, likely one meant to celebrate his engagement. He presented them with a riddle, confident in their inability to solve it. The prize for anyone who could answer the riddle within a week was to be 30 changes of clothes. In those days, extra clothing symbolized honor and status, making the prize not just valuable, but a true testament to the riddle's challenge. As Samson pondered the lion he had slain and the honey that had miraculously filled its carcass, inspiration struck. He spoke the riddle aloud. Out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet. Judges 14:14. It was a riddle that would perplex and intrigue the Philistines, for they could not yet understand the connection between the lion he had slain and the honey that had come from it. What was once a symbol of strength and danger had been transformed into something sweet and life-giving. The riddle itself reflected Samson's own life, his extraordinary strength, and his unexpected vulnerability. Little did the Philistines know. This riddle would not only test their wits, but also set the stage for a conflict that would ultimately reveal Samson's true purpose. Samson's father went down to see the woman, and there a great feast was prepared. It was the custom for young men to host such celebrations, and so Samson did. But as word spread of his presence, the Philistines appointed 30 men to stand as his companions during the occasion, though in truth, they were more like watchers than friends, keeping an eye on the powerful Israelite who had stirred their curiosity and suspicion. With boldness, Samson turned to them and said, "Let me tell you a riddle. If you can solve it within the 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. But if you cannot, then you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes." The men, intrigued and confident, replied, "Tell us your riddle. Let us hear it." And so Samson posed his enigmatic challenge. Out of the eater came something to eat, out of the strong came something sweet. Rating, for 3 days the men puzzled over his words, but none could discern their meaning. Their frustration grew into anger, and their pride would not allow them to lose. So they turned against Samson's bride, threatening her with death along with her family if she failed to pry the answer from him, caught between loyalty to her husband and fear for her life. The woman chose the path of desperation. She wept before Samson, day after day, her tears and pleas pressing heavily upon him. For 7 long days she tormented his heart until, worn down by her persistence, Samson at last revealed the secret. The moment the truth was given, the riddle lost its mystery. The Philistine men came with smug confidence and recited the answer, cloaking their theft in triumph. Samson, however, saw through their deceit instantly. He knew how they had discovered it, and his heart burned with anger. Yet even in this fury, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. Leaving Timnah, he went to another town and struck down 30 Philistine men, taking their garments and delivering them to those who had answered the riddle. In this way, he fulfilled the wager, but not without blood. Afterward, Samson returned to his father's house, his heart heavy and his spirit restless. He had not gone back to his wife, for trust had been broken, and the feast that began with celebration ended in betrayal and violence. What had seemed at first a game had now drawn Samson and the Philistines into a bitter conflict, one that would only grow sharper in the days to come. Some time passed, and Samson's path once again crossed with the Philistines in a storm of violence and vengeance. When the season of wheat harvest arrived, he set out to visit his wife, bringing a young goat as a token of reconciliation. His words were simple, "I am going to my wife's room," but her father stood in his way, shaking his head with nervous resolve. "I was so certain you hated her," he explained, "that I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister more attractive? Take her instead." Was it a promise? The insult cut deep. Samson's jaw tightened, his heart seething with fury. He answered with a chilling vow, "This time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them." And with that, he unleashed a form of destruction so cunning, so unrelenting, that the Philistines would never forget it. He went out into the fields and captured 300 foxes, tying them together, tail to tail, in pairs. To each pair he fastened a torch, and when the flames were lit, he released them into the Philistines' standing grain. In moments, the fields were ablaze, the harvest reduced to ash, the vineyards consumed, and the olive groves swallowed in fire. What was meant to be a season of abundance turned into a night of terror and loss. But vengeance only breeds more vengeance. When the Philistines demanded to know who had done such a thing, the answer came quickly. It was Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because his wife was given to another man. In their rage, they turned their wrath on the very woman Samson had once claimed, and her father, burning them alive in their own home. The cruel irony cut like a blade. The Philistines destroyed their own to satisfy their anger. When the news reached Samson, his fury burned hotter than the flames he had set upon their fields. "Since you acted like this," he swore, "I will not stop until I have had my revenge on you." He struck at them with unrelenting force, slaughtering many with his bare hands, leaving behind a trail of broken bodies as testimony to his wrath. And when the slaughter was finished, he withdrew to the cave in the rock of Etam, a fugitive from those who sought his life. A man both feared and hated, the Philistines, thirsting for retribution, advanced into Judah and encamped against its people, demanding that Samson be delivered to them. Fear gripped the hearts of the Israelites, who already bore the yoke of Philistine oppression. In desperation, 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cave of Etam, their voices trembling with accusation. "Don't you realize you've brought trouble on us by provoking the Philistines?" To them, Samson's defiance had not been liberation, but a curse. A spark that threatened to set all of Israel ablaze under the fury of their enemies. The irony of the moment is impossible to overlook. Israel, desperate and trembling under Philistine pressure, decided to betray the very man God had raised up to deliver them. 3,000 men of Judah approached Samson at the cave of Etam, not to honor him, not to rally behind him, but to hand him over to their oppressors. Their words were blunt: "We've come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines." Iswidlakjan, Samson, with a calm but steely resolve, gave them only one condition: "Swear to me that you will not kill me yourselves." Their answer was quick, almost rehearsed. "Agreed. We will only tie you up and hand you over. We will not kill you." With that, they bound him tightly with 2 new ropes and led him from the rock, as though delivering a prize to their enemies. The man chosen by God, set apart from birth, was tied and betrayed by his own people into the hands of their captors. When the Philistines saw Samson being brought down to Lehi, bound and helpless, their confidence erupted into shouts of victory. Their cries filled the air, mocking and triumphant. But in that very instant, the Spirit of the Lord descended upon Samson with unstoppable power. What had seemed like the end became the beginning of devastation for the Philistines. The ropes that bound him dissolved like burned flax, dropping from his hands as though they were nothing at all. Reaching down, Samson found the jawbone of a freshly fallen donkey in the hands of an ordinary man. It was no weapon at all, just a discarded bone in the dust. But in Samson's grasp, empowered by God's Spirit, it became a tool of destruction. With it, he struck down 1,000 Philistine warriors, turning their cries of victory into shrieks of terror and death. What happened at Lehi was not merely the triumph of one man's strength. It was the unmistakable mark of God's presence. With ropes that could not hold him and with a weapon that should not have mattered, Samson accomplished the impossible. The message was clear: when the Spirit of the Lord descends in power, no enemy can stand, no number can overwhelm. and no weakness can prevail. After Samson had delivered his powerful judgment on the Philistines, an overwhelming thirst took hold of him. He had just accomplished the impossible, slaying 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey. And now, exhausted and parched, he cried out to the Lord. His voice was filled with desperation as he asked, "You have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" In that moment of weakness, Samson, the mighty man who had just brought terror to his enemies, found himself humbled before God, the Lord. In his mercy and grace, did not turn away from Samson's plea. Instead, he responded in a way that only he could. From the hollow place in Lehi, a spring of water miraculously sprang forth, quenching Samson's thirst and restoring his strength. As the cool water revived him, Samson's spirit was renewed, and he regained the vigor that had nearly left him. The spring became a symbol of God's provision, and Samson named it En-Hakkore, which means the spring of the one who cried out. To this day, it is still said to be in Lehi, a testament to the faithfulness of God in the most unexpected moments. For 20 years, Samson judged Israel during the oppressive days of Philistine rule. Throughout his leadership, the Spirit of the Lord descended upon him powerfully, enabling him to perform miraculous feats that defied the natural laws. The Spirit empowered him to do things no ordinary man could ever do, from tearing apart a lion with his bare hands to bringing down a temple with nothing but his strength. But these miraculous moments were not just displays of raw power, they were acts of divine purpose, intended to show that God was still at work in Israel. In the Old Testament, the Spirit of the Lord descended upon certain individuals for specific tasks, to accomplish what would otherwise be impossible. However, something incredible happened after the cross. No longer would the Spirit only come upon select individuals for temporary tasks. In the New Testament, through the sacrifice of Christ, the Holy Spirit was sent to dwell within every believer, empowering them not just for moments of victory, but for daily living. As Paul writes in Ephesians 1:13, 1:4, "In whom ye also trusted. After that ye heard the word of truth, the gospel of your salvation, in whom also after that ye believed. Ye were sealed with that Holy Spirit of promise, which is the earnest of our inheritance until the redemption of the purchased possession, unto the praise of his glory." In Romans 8:9, he further assures us, "But ye are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if so be that the Spirit of God dwells in you. Now, if any man have not the Spirit of Christ, he is none of his." The significance of this is profound. After the cross, we, as believers, are not merely visited by the Spirit of God for moments of supernatural acts, we are indwelt by the Holy Spirit. The same Spirit that came upon Samson to accomplish the impossible now dwells within us, guiding, empowering, and transforming our lives. The work of the Spirit is not limited to supernatural feats, but is an ongoing, transformative presence within us, shaping us to live according to God's will. Just as Samson's strength was shaped by the Spirit for God's purpose, in Samson's story, we see that God's Spirit, though it came upon him for specific tasks, was a precursor to the deeper, more lasting work of the Spirit that would come through Christ. That same Spirit is still with us today, empowering us to do the work God has called us to, not just for moments of triumph, but in every part of our lives. The Spirit is not just with us, He is in us, working in us and through us for God's glory. Samson's story, at this point, is a powerful reflection of the tension between living under God's authority and being swept away by the desires of the flesh. In Galatians 5 says, we are reminded, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. Yet, like Israel, who for generations had struggled to walk in obedience to God, Samson found himself caught in the same cycle. Instead of being filled with the Spirit and living under God's authority, he was living in a way that reflected the very compromises Israel had made in the past. Ephesians 5, 10-8 Je believer. Do not get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit. But instead of walking by the Spirit, Samson seemed to be drifting further away, making choices that not only endangered his own life, but also reflected the spiritual corruption of his people. Samson's personal choices become all the more concerning as his journey continues. In Gaza, he encountered a prostitute, and despite being set apart by God for a divine purpose, he chose to indulge in an immoral act. This wasn't just an isolated incident. His actions mirrored the way Israel had turned away from God time and time again. Judges 2:17 recounts the people's unfaithfulness, saying, they went whoring after other gods and bowed themselves unto them. They had abandoned the Lord and embraced the ways of the surrounding nations, just as Samson now embraced the ways of the world around him. Israel's betrayal of God was made manifest in Samson's own life. Yet, in the midst of his moral compromise, Samson's strength remained a testimony to God's grace. When the Philistines in Gaza learned that Samson was with the prostitute, they believed they had him trapped. They surrounded the city, waiting for the break of dawn to capture him. But when Samson rose in the middle of the night, he didn't flee in fear. He displayed a supernatural strength that defied human logic. Taking hold of the massive city gates, with the 2 posts still attached, he tore them from their place, bar and all. He placed them on his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill facing Hebron. It's a remarkable scene, one that shows God's power at work, even when Samson was not living in alignment with his will. Imagine the difficulty of such a feat, lifting the gates, posts, and bars of a city and carrying them over a great distance. No man could do such a thing on his own. Yet, even though Samson was in a downward spiral, God's power was still evident in his life. Despite his moral failings, the divine strength Samson possessed remained, proving that God had not completely forsaken him. But this miraculous act also serves as a warning while God's grace is still evident. Continuing down this path of compromise would only lead to greater destruction. Samson's journey had spiraled deeper into darkness, as the choices he made increasingly reflected the very compromises that had led Israel astray for generations. His recent encounter with a prostitute in Gaza and his miraculous display of strength, tearing the city gates off their hinges and carrying them to the top of a hill, seemed to show that God's power was still with him. But the path he was on was fraught with danger, and the consequences were about to become much more personal. Sometime later, Samson fell in love with a woman named Delilah, who lived in the valley of Sorek. While it's unclear whether Delilah was a Philistine by birth, her loyalties clearly lay with them, especially when silver was offered. The rulers of the Philistines saw an opportunity in her and approached her with an enticing offer. If you can lure him into revealing the secret of his great strength, we will each give you 100 shekels of silver. They sought to discover the source of his power so they could overpower him, tie him up, and make him helpless. Delilah, seduced by both the promise of wealth and the allure of betraying Samson, set out to coax the truth from him. The first attempt was innocent enough, or so it seemed. Samson, ever the mysterious figure, told her that if anyone tied him with 7 fresh, undried bowstrings, he would become as weak as any other man. Delilah eagerly followed his instructions, tying him up with the bowstrings, and called out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." But Samson, with ease, snapped the bowstrings as if they were nothing more than a piece of twine near a flame. The secret remained hidden, unfazed. Delilah pressed on, accusing him of mocking her and playing with her affections. "You have made a fool of me," she said, her voice dripping with frustration. "Tell me how you can truly be subdued." Samson, unwilling to reveal his true vulnerability, gave her a new answer. If he were bound with new ropes that had never been used, he would be rendered powerless. So Delilah tried again, and once more. She called to him, "The Philistines are upon you." And again, Samson tore through the ropes as if they were nothing. The secret of his strength remained elusive. But Delilah was persistent. She knew her leverage, and it was the nagging weight of love, or what she claimed to be love, that would break him. "All this time, you've been lying to me," she said. "Tell me how you can truly be subdued." At last, Samson, worn down by her persistence, revealed the truth. "No razor has ever touched my head, for I have been a Nazirite, dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my hair were cut, I would lose my strength and become as weak as any other man." Calling sighed. The moment Samson spoke those words, Delilah's eyes glinted with triumph. She knew she had him, while Samson lay asleep in her lap. She made the final, devastating move. Delilah had Samson's hair shaved, and in that quiet moment, the Spirit of the Lord departed from him as she counted the silver, the Philistine leaders, hidden in the shadows, prepared to pay her the price of betrayal. When Samson awoke, he was unaware of the depth of his downfall. "The Philistines are upon you," Delilah cried, as she had done before. But this time, when he tried to rise and shake himself free, he found that the strength that had once been his, this miraculous, God-given power was gone. The Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him away to Gaza, where they bound him in bronze chains and put him to grinding grain in the prison. Samson's story is marked by divine strength, but also by a tragic downfall brought on by his personal choices and his inability to recognize the cost of compromising with the world. Each step he took away from God, each decision to follow his desires rather than God's calling, led him further into captivity, even in his darkest moment. However, God's purpose for Samson was not over. Samson, once the mighty hero of Israel, now lay in the hands of his enemies, a broken man who had been brought low by his own choices. When he awoke from his sleep, his mind was clouded, his confidence still intact, but his strength was gone. "I will escape as I did before and shake myself free," he thought, as if the same divine power that had empowered him to tear apart lions and slay thousands with a jawbone would return to him in a moment. But he did not know, could not understand that the Lord had left him. That was the tragedy of it. Samson, in his pride and disobedience, had lost the very source of his strength and didn't even realize it. His mistake had been clear. He had allowed his relationship with Delilah to overshadow his devotion to God. In his love for her, he had opened the door to his destruction, and in doing so, he had made the fatal error of trusting a human relationship more than his relationship with the Lord. No matter how intimate or personal the bond may be, Samson's downfall reminds us that nothing, no person, Nazirite, no temptation can be more important than our devotion to God. The price of his transgression was steep. Samson, the one who had been set apart by God from birth, was now helpless, bound, and betrayed. The Philistines wasted no time in taking full advantage of Samson's vulnerability. His eyes were gouged out, a cruel symbol of his blindness to the reality of his situation. Both physically and spiritually, he was shackled in bronze and forced to grind grain in a prison, reduced to the labor of an animal. A far cry from the mighty judge who once held the fate of nations in his hands. The enemies of God had taken control of his every move. This serves as a solemn reminder: when we allow God to be removed from the equation of our lives, we give the enemy room to control us. Without God's Spirit, we are powerless to defend ourselves against the forces that seek to destroy us. When Delilah saw that Samson had revealed the secret of his strength, she wasted no time in betraying him to the Philistine rulers. "Come back once more," she sent word to them. "He has told me everything," with silver in hand. The rulers returned to Delilah's home, where she once again put Samson to sleep in her lap. And as he rested there, oblivious to the betrayal unfolding around him, someone quietly shaved off the 7 braids of his hair. The strength that had once surged within him faded in an instant. Delilah's actions were the final act of treachery, and in that moment, Samson's downfall was sealed. Delilah called to him, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." He stirred from his sleep, thinking that, as before, he would rise and break free from the chains that bound him. But this time, the power that had been his for so long was gone. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. With that, the Philistines seized him, mocking the very man who had once terrified them. His eyes were gouged out, his body bound in chains, and he was dragged to Gaza. There, he was forced to work as a prisoner, grinding grain like a beast of burden, a far cry from the powerful judge he had been. Yet, even in his humiliation, there was a glimmer of hope. Though Samson had fallen, though his strength had left him, there was still one thing that remained. His hair began to grow back. It was a small, quiet sign, but it was a sign nonetheless. The power of God had not left Samson completely. It was simply waiting for the right moment to return. His hair growing back was a symbol of God's grace, a reminder that even in our lowest moments, God is still at work, and redemption is still possible. In this pivotal moment of Samson's life, we sense that God was not finished with him yet. Even though Samson had fallen to the lowest point imaginable, a glimmer of hope emerged. His hair began to regrow. The regrowth of his hair, once the outward symbol of his divine strength, now became a powerful indicator of something much deeper. It signified Samson's inner repentance, his turning back to God after a period of rebellion and weakness. It was as if God was silently whispering, "It's not over yet. Samson, there is still a purpose for you." His hair's return symbolized the beginning of a new chapter, one where repentance would lead to restoration. Sometimes, in order for us to truly return to God, we have to reach the absolute depths of despair. Samson had reached the bottom, his eyes gouged out, his body shackled, and his spirit broken. Yet, even at his lowest, God was at work, waiting for Samson's heart to turn toward him. The regrowth of Samson's hair was a quiet but profound sign that he was not beyond redemption. It was God's grace at work, beginning to take root once more. Meanwhile, the Philistines were celebrating, convinced they had triumphed over their enemy. They had captured Samson, the one who had once struck terror into their hearts, and now they were ready to mock him. The leaders of the Philistines gathered in a great assembly to offer a sacrifice to their god, Dagon, thanking him for delivering Samson into their hands. The atmosphere was filled with rejoicing, the kind that comes when an enemy is humbled. They took pleasure in their supposed victory, saying, "Our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands." In their drunken celebration, they demanded that Samson be brought out to entertain them. The mighty judge who had once struck down entire armies was now their prisoner, and they wanted to see him humiliated. They placed him between the temple's pillars, a symbolic position, but one that would soon lead to their downfall. The Philistines, in their arrogance, were unknowingly setting themselves up for failure. The temple was packed 3,000. Men and women lined the roof, watching eagerly as Samson was led out. Amidst the taunts and laughter, Samson, standing between the pillars, felt the weight of the moment. He knew that this would be his last chance. With quiet resolve, he asked the servant who guided him to place his hands on the pillars that supported the temple. He could feel the weight of the structure, the pulse of the moment. He knew that if he could bring these pillars down, he would bring down the entire Philistine leadership in one mighty blow. Samson, at the lowest point of his life, did something remarkable. He prayed. In that moment of desperation and realization, he turned to the Lord. "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes." This was not just a prayer for revenge, it was a prayer for redemption, a final act of obedience. Samson had been humbled, and in his humility, he asked for strength to accomplish the very mission God had set before him. And God answered. With one final burst of strength, Samson pushed against the pillars with all his might, and the temple came crashing down. The roof collapsed, killing the leaders and the people who had gathered to mock him. In that moment, Samson killed more of Israel's oppressors than he had in all his previous days combined. The victory was not his, but God's, delivered through Samson's obedience. Even in his brokenness, Samson's final act was a moment of redemption. Though his life had been marked by flaws and failures, God was still able to use him in the end. His prayer, though a plea for vengeance, was also a prayer for God to use him once more. God's grace, though often overlooked in Samson's story, was evident in the end. It was a reminder that even in our darkest moments, when we feel most defeated, God can still work through us for his purpose. Samson's story is a complex one, marked by both triumph and failure. He was a man chosen by God, gifted with extraordinary strength, yet he repeatedly succumbed to the idolatrous culture surrounding him, making choices that ultimately led to his downfall. His life is a sobering reminder of how easily we can be influenced by the world and how our mistakes can lead us far from the path God has set for us. Yet, despite his flaws, there is a redemptive aspect to his story that gives hope. In Hebrews 11:32-3, Samson is mentioned alongside other giants of faith, such as Daniel, who lived righteous lives and trusted in God's promises. This inclusion in the Hall of Faith is significant. It reminds us that even those who faltered, who made mistakes and faced consequences for their actions, can still be remembered for their faith in God. Samson, despite his errors, believed that God could still use him to accomplish his will. And in the end, he did. This inclusion in Hebrews gives us hope that, no matter how far we've fallen, God is still able to use us for his purposes. Samson's final act of faith, when he called out to God for strength, demonstrated that he still believed in God's power and redemptive plan. It's a beautiful reminder that our mistakes do not have to be the final word on our lives. If we turn back to God, he can still use us for his glory. Though Samson's life was far from perfect, there is something we can learn from his story. He believed that God could still work through him, despite his flaws. And so should we. We may not always make the right decisions, and we may stumble along the way. But if we trust God, submit to his plan for our lives, and give him everything we have, he will still use us to carry out his will. Samson's story is ultimately one of hope, proof that even in our imperfections, God can bring about his purposes through us. Samson's life is a powerful reminder that even when we stumble, make mistakes, or stray from the path, God's purpose for our lives remains unshaken. His story isn't just one of incredible strength, but also of deep flaws, redemption, and grace, even at his lowest point. When he had lost everything, Samson's heart still turned toward God, and in that moment, God used him for his divine purpose. His life teaches us that God doesn't discard us because of our failures. Rather, he offers us the chance to rise again, stronger, through his grace. In our own lives, we may feel broken, overwhelmed by past mistakes, or unsure of the future. But Samson's story shows us that it's never too late to turn back to God, to trust in his power, and to believe that he can still use us for something greater. Just like Samson, we all have moments where we lose sight of God's plan, but that doesn't mean it's the end of our journey. There is always hope, always redemption, and always the possibility to rise again. Let Samson's story inspire you to believe that no matter where you are in life, God can use you for his glory. Whether you're at a crossroads, facing challenges, or dealing with past regrets, trust that your best days are ahead when you turn to him. If this message has inspired you, I encourage you to like, share, and subscribe to this channel so more people can hear about the hope that comes from trusting in God's plan. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an uplifting message. And feel free to comment below. I'd love to hear how you're letting God work through you in your own journey. Thank you so much for your support. And remember, God's purpose for your life is always greater than your past mistakes. Stay strong, stay faithful, and trust that the best is yet to come.